ड्रिंक झालं होतं शनिवारचं. मग ते रविवारी थोडंफार मी सोमवारी तरी आवरून घेऊन
I, Ankita Bangar, welcome you all
संध्याकाळी
on the second day of the series of VCM on auditing standards. I would also like to welcome our panelists for today, CA Sameer Ladda sir, Chairman and Treasurer, Pune ICAI branch, and our speaker for the first session for today, CA Ravi Kumar Patwa sir. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
I would request Sameer sir to please address the audience.
Well, thank you, Ankita. Today's honorable speaker, C. Ravi Kumar ji. Other speaker, C. Gyan Kumar ji Sharma, in absentia. He is expected to join soon. Today's MOC, C. Ankita Bangar. My co-chairman, C. Kashinath Pathare. And all the August audience, welcome on second day in this 3 days series on standard of auditing. I personally thanks Ravi Kumar sir for giving your valuable time to Pune branch and our audience. Thank you, sir, and welcome on behalf of Pune branch and all the August audience. Participants, it is my pleasure to announce that we have national conference on indirect tax from the 30th, that is the day after tomorrow, 30th, 31st and 31st of August. So if you have registered already, welcome. If you are not registered, please register for this national conference on GST. Also, it is really pleasure to announce that Pune branch has generated so far more than 1 lakh CP hours in this current academic year, and lot of period is pending. So participants, thanks a lot to all of you. This happened because just of your overwhelming participation always. I thanks from sincere to you from bottom of heart. Please do participate in ahead also in such wonderful sessions organized by Pune branch. We are always happy to arrange such sessions because you are taking participant. Without your participation, there is no meaning for arranging such a sessions on different topics. Thank you very much. With this opening remarks, I request Ankita Bangar for further process.
Thank you, sir. Before we start with our session, I would like to give a brief introduction of our speaker for today, CA Ravi Patwa sir. So he's a practicing chartered accountant from Silchar, Assam. I would like to say because of this virtual platform, we are able to have speakers from all parts of India. So really happy to have you, sir. Currently, he is the advisor to National Council of the Institute of Internal Auditors of India. He is the Vice Chairman of Eastern India Regional Council of the ICAI. He is a member of Assam State Council of FICCI. He is a member of Eastern Regional Taxation Council of ASSOCHAM. He is a convener of Northeast Chapter of JITO and Jain Professional Forum. He is Sayojak Swadeshi Jagran Manch. He is a member of Sayojak Swadeshi Jagran Manch for the state of Assam and Northeast, and he is also a member of BJP Professional Cell. He had secured 6th rank in India in the 2nd Eastern India in DISA examination conducted by the institute. He is an official reviewer of the guidance note on audit of state cooperative banks and district cooperative banks published by NABARD and ICAI. He is a member of study group to review auditing and assurance standards issued by the ICAI in light of the new Companies Act 2013. He is also a member of group to study and suggest changes and guidelines relating to networking of CA firms. He is a member of RBI's state level coordination committee for NBFCs and unincorporated bodies accepting public deposits. He is a member of direct tax committee of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, member of Professional Development Committee of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, and a member of capacity building for CA firms, capacity building of CA firms and small and medium practitioners of the institute. Under special achievements, under his chairmanship, for the first time, any branch from Eastern India earned any national award. Guwahati branch won 2 national awards under his chairmanship and also received the Best Branch in Eastern India award. Sir, we are really glad to have you today with us for the session. We can now start with the session. We will take, if you have any queries or question answers, please post them in the question and answer tab on your screen. We'll take them after the session.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ankita Madam. Chairman of Pune branch, Mr. Samir Ladha. Vice Chairman and Secretary, Mr. Kashinath Pathare. MOC, Madam Ankita Wangad. And my co-speaker for the day, Mr. Gyan Prakash Sharma from Jaipur. All the participants, the delegates for today's evening, my dear colleagues and professional friends, a very, very good evening to each one of you. At the outset, before I start speaking about the subject matter given to me for discussion, I would convey my gratitude to the Pune branch managing committee, especially to the chairman and others who felt it appropriate to call upon somebody from the remotest corners of Northeast India to come and have a discussion and share his views on a matter concerning auditing with a branch which is a very thriving branch and which has innumerable number of members who are excellently good auditors. I cannot express my glee in proper words. I would just say thank you very much for this opportunity. Now coming to the topic of discussion today, documentation, Standard on Auditing 230. Friends, if we have to choose two standards on auditing which are of paramount importance, which are the father and mother of the auditing standards, then we will have to choose SQC1 on one side and SA230 on other side. SA230 is rightly said to be the mother of all auditing standards. The need for audit documentation was first felt when the auditors were increasingly hauled up for not following or for not being able to display that they are following the audit steps and procedures required to be applied to fulfill the audit objectives. Now, what are the audit objectives? We all know that in a normal audit, the audit objective is to obtain a reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatement, either due to fraud or error or otherwise. And we will basically stick to the audit assignments which require reasonable assurance. To drive home the point of importance of SA230, I would like to start off with a story. Not a story, rather a real life thing which had happened. Way back in 2011, in Japan, there was a scam called Olympus scam. If you remember, Olympus was world's largest optical equipment manufacturing company at that point of time. Now, Olympus had a very, very powerful president. Now, here we call the board head as the chairman. There it is called, in Japan, they call it president. And normally, the Japanese board structure is such that the people at the helm of affairs are mostly all Japanese. They do not easily allow the non-Japanese people to go up high in the hierarchy of their management. Now, Mr. Tsuyoshi Kikukawa was the president of Olympus. He was earlier the CEO and then he uplifted himself to the president. And a Britisher called Mr. Michael Woodford was given the charge as the CEO. He was one of the very, very few non-Japanese CEOs of good companies in Japan. Now, after Mr. Michael Woodford joined in as the CEO, within a few months, he started feeling that there's something going wrong in the company. He wanted to take it up in the board meetings, but somehow the board members, especially Mr. Kikukawa, made sure that the matters were not discussed. Then he wanted to discuss it one-on-one with the president because he was suspecting something is going wrong. Now, Kikukawa also brushed it aside. and then ultimately being unable to do anything else, one fine day, Mr. Michael Woodford gave an interview to one of the leading business magazines of Japan, and he basically whistleblowed in that magazine. Now, immediately after he did it, the whole board went against him, ousted Woodford. Kikukawa was in power. Although Mr. Michael Woodford actually told what is going wrong in the company, he was ousted. Lawsuits were filed against him, so much so that he had to flee away from Japan in disguise. Now, not going to that story, if we come to the auditors, you know, KPMG were the auditors for Olympus Corporation. And 2 years before that, in 2009 itself, KPMG auditors felt that there is perhaps something wrong going on in the company. It was actually going on since 2006-7. Okay. So auditors in 2009 felt that there is perhaps something wrong going on in the company. They, you know, flooded the management with queries. But the management had two very good chartered accountants at the top of their accounting team, Mr. Mori and Mr. Yamada. And they both were good enough to give a reasonable and satisfactory reply to each and every query raised by KPMG. The same thing followed the next year. Next year again, KPMG raised a lot of queries. They were suspecting something is wrong. Again, everything was properly answered by Mori and Yamada. And KPMG was bound to give a clean report, unqualified opinion. Now, when the quality review for the audit was going on, the quality review partner of KPMG felt that this audit has become very, very risky. And he felt that KPMG should come out of this audit. So it was done. KPMG pulled out of the audit. And the audit went to E&Y. Now, E&Y also raised lots of queries. Everything was answered and everything was kept with them. And then ultimately, E&Y also had to give an unqualified opinion on the on the financial statements. After that, this happened. And obviously, lawsuits were filed against KPMG and E&Y also. All over the world, if you see, wherever there has been a large scam, the auditors have also been hauled up. They were also held guilty. We see in our country also, wherever something happens, irrespective of whether the audit has been properly done or not, before going into it, the media first, paints them to be the guilty, and then everyone else follows. Similar was the case with them. But in the court of law, in the apex court of Japan, KPMG and E&Y could prove that they had done everything possible on the part of an auditor to obtain a reasonable assurance that everything is right with the company. They have raised all the queries. And although some of the answers were manipulated, the auditors had no reason to disbelieve, because everything else connected to it was also collected by the auditors from the management, and there was nothing in the other documents also which could have given them a hint that something is going wrong. So friends, what I want to say is that such is the importance of audit documentation. If we keep the documentation proper, then we can save our skin. If not, we all know what can happen to us. With these words, ladies and gentlemen, let us share the screen. Is it visible? Can anybody confirm, please?
Yes, it's visible.
Thank you. Okay. So I believe that the audit documentation is the auditor's principal record of the audit procedures performed, evidences obtained, and conclusions reached. We, colloquially or popularly, we call the audit documentation as the working papers, and the working papers have two functions, mainly to provide support for the audit report and to aid in the conduct and supervision of the audit. Now, this is one slide which I have picked up from the audit documentation book of the Institute. This is what the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India feels is the nature and purpose of audit documentation. So I thought, let me start the deliberation with this slide itself. They say that these 8 are the purposes of audit documentation, starting with assist engagement team in planning and performing. I do not have to explain, you all understand it. Then assisting in supervision and direction. Then evidence of audit planning and performance as per standards of auditing and applicable laws and regulations. Okay. Then assist in QC review, quality control reviews. We all know that the ethical standards have changed, applicable from 1st of July 2019. And we all know that there is a new concept called engagement quality control reviewer. The term EQCR is very, very popular these days. Even the proprietorship firms will have to follow this concept of having an EQCR. Now, I'm not going into the details of it. It's a matter of code of ethics, and this is something which everybody, every professional connected to the profession of chartered accountancy should go through in detail. There are few provisions of ethics which are kept on hold, but the day they come, say for example, when the NOCLAR comes, auditing would become much more tougher. Anyways, let us not go into that detail. Then it creates accountability, obviously. Obviously for the audits, even for non-audit purposes, even for filing of, even for the compliance works like filing of returns, etc. If you have a trail of which staff of yours have done what, then you can hold him accountable. The major problem with our profession is that we all do the work very, very well. Most of us do. But somehow very few of us have a proper record of what we have done. And that is where the problem lies. That is why when there is an issue which comes up, we're unable to prove to the outside world that we have done a very good job with the audit. That is what we need to change. Then record matters of continuing significance. There is a matter called significant matter, and there are other matters which are not significant matters. We'll discuss in the due course of time. Evidence of basis for conclusion regarding achievement of overall objectives. We all know what is the overall objective. In case of an audit, it could be normal audit, a stat audit, it would be reasonable assurance. In case of a review matter, it would be a limited assurance. In case of certain kinds of certification, etc., it would be an absolute assurance. And then it assists in external inspection. Now, external inspections are also of paramount importance now. The days are such that the oversight bodies are increasing. The process of peer review have undergone a change. Now, the peer review process is much more stringent. And those of us who have just got their peer review done a year or two back, they are saved. But from last year onwards, the process has become so stringent. Then those who will be getting it done now will see the difference. There is a gulf of difference in the peer review process which was there earlier and what is there now. We all know what FRRB is doing. Then there is Taxation Quality Review Board. For the larger audits, there is NFRA, Public Interest Entities Audits. Earlier, the Public Interest Entities Audits only were picked up by the QRB, the Quality Review Board. Now, let me diverse this information to the August gathering here. That Quality Review Board now will percolate down to the lower level. They would not remain, concerned only with the public interest entities. They are going to go down at much lower level because public interest entities have now gone to an FRA. And we know how stringent, if any one of you have, faced QRB, or if any one of you is a quality reviewer, you all know how stringent is the requirement there. So if the same requirements come for the smaller audits and for smaller firms, then unless and until we have a very, very strong documentation system, we would be facing the music. Now, there are a few definitions, which are 3 specific definitions which are there in the SA 230. One of the definitions is important, rest 2 are okay. I'll just read once. Audit documentation. It's defined as a record of audit procedures performed, relevant audit evidence is obtained, and conclusions the auditors have reached, also called the working papers. An audit file, 1 or more folders or other storage media in physical or electronic form containing the records that comprise the audit documentation file. Now, this is the definition which is important. Experienced auditor. All throughout SA 230 and even in the other standards on auditing, you will come across these words called experienced auditor. An experienced auditor is an individual, whether internal or external to the firm, who has practical audit experience and a reasonable understanding of the audit processes, the standards on auditing and applicable legal and regulatory requirements, the business environment in which the entity operates, and the auditing and financial reporting issues relevant to the entity's industry. So, when you undertake an audit assignment, you are supposed to be an experienced auditor. And you are supposed to do everything which an experienced auditor is expected to do. It can never be a plea that I did not know about the business of the entity, and for that, for the first year, I was perhaps a little laxy. The laxity would not be allowed, because whenever you take up the assignment, you are supposed to be an experienced auditor, or your team is supposed to contain people who are experienced auditors. And this is what an experienced auditor will be. He is likely to know all the audit processes, all the standards on auditing, and all the applicable laws and regulatory requirements applicable to that particular business entity. The business environment of the entity also. If you do not know the environment, you will falter in SA 570. You will not be in a position to ascertain whether the going concern is impaired or not. And all the auditing and financial reporting issues relevant to the entity's industry must also be known to the experienced auditor. Now, these are the coverage of audit documentation, which the Institute also says. The nature, timing, and extent of the audit procedures performed to comply with the standards on auditing and applicable legal and regulatory requirements. So all these must be there in the audit documentation. All these are covered in the audit documentation. The results of the audit procedures performed and the audit evidences obtained. Now, once you decide on the extent of audit procedures which are required to be performed to comply with the standards on auditing and other legal and regulatory requirements, you will note it down, and then the procedures will be performed. You will record all the procedures which are being performed and all the audit evidences which are obtained after performing the audit procedures. And then from that, you will identify the significant matters arising during the audit, the conclusions reached on the significant matters, and the significant professional judgments made in reaching those conclusions. Please remember, my friends, whenever there is a significant matters which comes up during an audit, then the auditor or his team will have to, take a professional judgment, make a professional judgment. And that professional judgment is significant for the audit. It is a matter subjective. Okay, so the recording of all the significant matters, and how did you conclude that matter, whether you agreed, how did you communicate with the management about on the significant matters, what was the reply of the management, how did you come to the conclusion, what made you convinced that this is okay, this can be dropped, what convinced you that this is something which is not okay, this needs to be a part of the notes on accounts. You convinced the management to include it in notes on accounts, or what convinced you that this is something which is graver than that and you need to include it in your audit report? And then if you have to include it in your audit report, whether this requires a qualified opinion or the opinion will be okay, but just you will include it as another matter or something like that, or a key audit matter that you need to, include in the audit report, because that is important to understand the background. These are significant matters which you must note down. Everything must be noted down properly. This is something which I have drafted. These could be the contents of audit documentation, my dear friends. Please note that this is not an exhaustive list. This is just something I have drafted. At least these must be there. Organizational chart, the accounting manual, the internal control documentations, the minutes of the boards and committee meetings, the abstracts or copies of the entity's records, for example, important contracts or agreements, etc. Of course, the financial statements and trial balance, the audit programs, the details of audit procedures performed, the analytical procedures undertaken, the details of audit evidences obtained, the checklists that you followed, the memorandum of relevant issues, the letters of confirmations and representations, summaries of significant matters along with professional judgments made and conclusions drawn on them, the correspondence including email of the concerning the significant matters with the management, and the management representations and minutes of meetings with the management. These are just some of the matters which should be there in the audit documentation. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just an illustrative list. Now, audit documentations would depend on a lot of issues. Obviously, when you are conducting an audit of a listed entity, the nature of documentation cannot be the same as that of a partnership firm for which you are just doing a tax audit. Proper documentation is required for every attest function that you do. For every audit is important. But obviously, the nature, the timing, and the nature and the extent, not the timing, nature and the extent of the documentation would vary depending on many things. Now, what are the determinants that determine what should be the documentation? The nature of engagement, what kind of engagement it is. Degree of reliance on internal controls. Obviously, when you are relying more on the internal controls, then, the documentation relating to the internal control and why and how have you relied on it would be more. And if you rely more, then the substantive checking will be less and the documentation pertaining to that will be lesser. On the contrary, the lesser the reliance, the substantive checking will be higher, the materiality levels will be lower. So naturally, you will have to have more documents concerning the procedural aspects. Then the size and complexity of the entity, more complex the entity, more will be the documentation requirement. The nature and audit procedures to be performed will also determine what kind of documentation will be required. The identified risk of material misstatement, more the risk that you identify, then obviously the documentation requirement and the checking requirement obviously would be high. And it may so happen that you identify the risk at the beginning, and during the course of audit, after performing some procedures, you come across certain evidences which makes you feel that the level of risk that you have identified needs to be changed, then that additional requirement of documentation would come up. And if the level of reliance changes and the level of risk exposure increases, the documentation obviously would increase manifold. The significance of the audit evidence is obtained. The nature and extent of exceptions identified when you come across, obviously when you conduct an audit, there will be exceptions to whatever rules you frame. But what we need to decide is whether a particular exception is acceptable or not. And the recording of that is required. All your audit evidences would never be such that everything is perfect in the entity. There will be exceptions. But what is the level of exception? What is the acceptability of that exception for you as an auditor? That would determine the documentation. The need to document the basis of a conclusion. Obviously, the more the significant matters that you come across, there will be requirement or the need for making more conclusions on the significant matters. So obviously the need to document those significant matters and the conclusions drawn on the significant matters would go up. The audit methodology and the tool that you used may also determine the extent of audit documentation that is required. Okay, now let us move on to the significant matter. What is a significant matter? This is very, very important. Now the SA 230 defines the significant matters in this manner. Significant matters are matters that give rise to significant risks. Right? Now, they may result, they are the results of audit procedures which indicate that financial statements could be materially misstated, or there is a need to revise auditor's previous assessment of risk of material misstatement and the auditor's response to those risks. So as I was discussing in the last slide also, a matter would become a significant matter when, after performing some audit procedures, you feel that there is a risk that whatever you had decided as the inherent risk of there being a material misstatement is getting changed. If you come across an evidence where you feel that the financial statements could be materially misstated, then it is a significant matter. Or when there is a need, when you feel that the previous assessment of risk of material misstatement needs to be changed, and obviously because of that, auditor's response to the risks identified would change, and the risks earlier you had thought of would change, and then more testing will be required. So these are significant matters, and these significant matters would require significant judgment to be made. Okay. Significant matters could be circumstances causing significant difficulty in applying necessary audit procedures. If the circumstances become such that the auditee or his team or somebody else is making it difficult for you to carry out the audit properly, they are not supportive, they are not cooperating in the audit procedures, in performing the audit, then that is a significant matter for us, because maybe they are trying to hide something. Findings that could result in a modification to the audit opinion. First three are significant matters which you come across during the course of audit. Whereas the last one is something where you have formed the audit opinion, but after that you come across a finding which requires a modification on the audit opinion already formed or issued. So all these are significant matters. And whenever there is a significant matter, you need to have specific documentations to be done for significant matters. What are those? Summary of significant matter and how they were addressed, that needs to be documented properly. The abstract of discussion on significant matters with the management. Whenever you come across a significant matters, it may so happen that our understanding is wrong, and that is why we are feeling something is significant, whereas it may not be. So the first thing that we need to do is communicate with the management and seek their opinion on it. But we have to apply our professional mind and apply our professional judgment, and not necessarily whatever the management says we have to agree, or not necessarily whatever we thought, irrespective of the management trying to make us understand, and the management having some, rightful claim to the whatever they are claiming. If we close our eyes and feel that no, they are wrong and we are right, then that is not right kind of auditing that we are doing. So we need to discuss with the management and then take a professional judgment. Okay, so abstract of that discussion must be there, and then the rationale for auditor's conclusion on aspects significant to the audit. Why did we frame the opinion after discussing with the management? Why did we feel that they are wrong or we are right, or we are right or they are wrong, or they are right or we are accepting their contention? That we need to document as well. And then the basis of conclusion on reasonableness of areas of subjective judgment. Professional judgment, you see, is always subjective. What Sandeep ji feels, that is, something which does not require a qualification. It may so happen that Ankita ji feels that no, this requires a qualified opinion. So, what is important is not that whether you are qualified or not. It is important, but even more than that, it is important on what basis have you decided to qualify, or on what basis have you decided not to qualify, and mention it somewhere else in the financial statements. So that basis of conclusion and the reasonableness of making that professional judgment is very, very important, and that must be very, very clearly and vividly documented. This itself, all the cases which happen because of significant matters, and if we have to win cases, if we have to save our skin, then the proper recording and documentation of the significant matters and the professional judgments that we make on significant matters is of paramount importance. So the basis of conclusion regarding authenticity of a document, when authenticity is in doubt, should also be recorded. Remember the Satyam case. The management gave you Xerox copies of the FDs, and as an auditor, you accepted that they are right. You did not check it with the banker whether the FDs were actually there or not. And you did not even record how come you accepted the Xerox copies, and why you did not seek for the third party confirmation on the fixed deposits. So how do you, there could be some cases where the authenticity, especially in the COVID circumstances today, it is possible that we cannot visit the sites and we procure the documents online. Now, how do we satisfy ourselves that the online document which are coming to us is not fabricated? Recording of the basis on which you are accepting the document and not doubting the authenticity of the document is important. We need to do that. Okay. That. Preparation of audit files. Friends, the final audit file preparation must be completed. within 60 days of the completion of the audit. That is, within 60 days of the signing of the report. This is as per SQC 1. I think it is there in para, I am forgetting the para number. Anyways, this is as per SQC 1, para 56 or something. Now, while preparing the audit file, certain changes like deleting or discarding or superseded documentation, sorting, collating or cross-referencing working papers, etc. are permitted. Okay. So you would have different teams. One team is perhaps looking into the turnover, the sales. Another team is looking into the debtors. Both these teams would perhaps require some contracts or agreements with the buyers of our product. And it is possible that both the teams have procured the contracts. Now, when you prepare the final audit file, it is not needed that you keep the copies of both your audit teams. You know, because the same document would serve the purpose, you can just make a reference and keep one copy of the document in your audit file. Similarly, you know, there would be everyday recording of your junior audit, audit teams, juniors specifically, date-wise, what have you done, what have you checked, what not, and all. It is not essential that you keep each and every paper of that, but it is important that you make a summary of that and keep all the important things in the final audit file. In no way I am saying that you do not keep the, detailed day-wise checking of your juniors. It may be required, it may not be required, it will depend on circumstances, it will depend on the auditee and so many other things. All that I want to say is that you can take the judgment of what is required and what not, and then prepare the final audit file. But once the final audit file is prepared, you cannot change the final audit file. It can only be changed under exceptional circumstances, not normally. And when such exceptional circumstances arise and you need to change it, then you need to give specific reasons for making the change, as well as when and by whom they were made and reviewed, must be recorded. So somebody will change the audit file if there is such circumstance that you need to change the contents of the audit file, audit documentation, and then somebody senior or some other partner level person will review it. Both these should be recorded. Okay. Now there are certain very, very important points which we need to keep in mind. Friends, it is important to prepare sufficient and appropriate audit documentation on a timely basis. It calls for sufficient as well as appropriate audit documentation. It need not be bulky, but whatever is needed must always be there, and that judgment only the auditor can take. We all talk about professional skepticism being followed. So we cannot document that we have followed professional skepticism. How do you do that? But our documentation file can demonstrate that we have followed professional skepticism. And once we can prove that we have followed professional skepticism, then most of the troubles that we can face in future would not come our way. Please remember that the documents are property of the auditors. You are not supposed to hand it over to somebody else. Okay. And documents must be retained for 7 years. Now, when I say documents must be retained for 7 years, Please remember that I am talking about SA 230. Standard of Auditing 230 on audit documentation says that we have to retain the documents for 7 years. Now, International Standard on Auditing ISA 230 says that they have to retain for 5 years, not 7. Till 28th of May 2010 in India, it was 10 years. See the fallacy. Today, SA 230 is talking about 7 years. But if there is a case which is 8 years old, and somebody asks for some documents, and you tell them that SA 230 talks about 7 years, do you think you will be held scot-free? You can escape scot-free? No. There is an anomaly in this, because the regulation 14 of the Chartered Accountants Regulation 1988 still remains unchanged. And the regulation 14 still talks about 10 years. And unless and until the regulation 14 is changed, somebody can still call for the documents till 10 years of signing of your audit report. Okay. Please remember that it is subjective and a matter of professional judgment. Obviously, audit documentation would vary from person to person, from industry to industry, from auditee to auditee. What we need to ensure is that it is sufficient and appropriate. Once we are in a position to prove it to the outside world, as I talked about the Olympus case, and there are so many other examples of this kind. In the smaller cases, of course, in bigger cases, mostly we have seen that the auditors are always held guilty, except this is an aberration to that, perhaps, Olympus case. So once we are in a position to prove that we had done everything which was required to be done by us as an auditor, we can still save our skin. We can, in one line, we can say that the audit documentation is the backbone of our audit. The work that the auditor performs, the explanations given to him, the conclusions arrived at, are all evidenced by audit documentation. Now, poor documentation may depict poor performance in an audit. As an auditor, we may have executed all the appropriate procedures. But if there is no documentation to prove it, it may put a question mark on the work done by us. And in cases where material misstatement is reported, improper or incomplete documentation is bound to put the auditor in an embarrassing situation. So let us avoid it, friends. And, while I wish that the session was a little more interactive, whatever. Before I conclude, I would like to say that, when we think of audit documentation, anybody who wants to study audit documentation must thoroughly go through the implementation guide to SA 230. This implementation guide was first published in 2015, I suppose, and then revised in 2018. It's a very small book, only 62 pages. And this book has 37 FAQs. You will find it on the Institute's website. FAQ number 37 has a detailed list of essay-wise documentation requirement. So which essay requires what documentation? More or less a general idea you will get. There also the implementation guide clearly says that this is only an illustrative list and not an exhaustive list. But more or less we can take a guidance from it. Say for example, we are talking about 570, the going concern standard in auditing. Now, how do you prove that it is a going concern? What documents would be required for that? Basic idea you will get from it, from the implementation guide. When you talk about third-party confirmations, many people have this, wrong notion that you can tell the client and he can get the documents from the third parties that you want the confirmations from, and you will be satisfied that we have got the third-party confirmations. I'm afraid that is not how third-party confirmations are procured. Third-party confirmation must be procured directly by the auditor, writing to the parties concerned. Otherwise, the auditor can always influence. The auditor can always influence and get the confirmations, and your purpose would not be served. So what kind of documentation do you require to support it? In today's world, in the COVID-specific world, the process of inventory taking and valuation. Of course, you need not take the inventory yourself, but it is a requirement that the auditor's team members must be present and must oversee the process and satisfy themselves that the inventory is properly taken and the valuation is properly done. Now, how do you satisfy yourself? And for that, what kind of documentation requirement is there? All this will be covered in FAQ 37, most of these. Please go through FAQ 37 of that, implementation guide. The chapter 4 of the implementation guide also has an illustrative checklist. And FAQ 15 has documentation requirement for small entities. So when we audit smaller entities, then what kind of documentation is required? Essay-wise example is given in FAQ 15 of that implementation guide. That's a fantastic book published by the Institute. For the normal audits, it would be very, very helpful. Follow it. But of course, for the higher level audits, for the listed company audits and all, perhaps more requires to be done. And we need to perhaps go through more details. We need to document more items, more matters. Friends, whatever I had to talk about documentation, I have more or less covered, and I believe the time is also up. I was asked to finish off by 6:43:44. It's already 6:45, so I should stop now. Rather, it is 6:55, 53:54. I was asked to finish by. And I'm ready to take any questions which members may be having in their minds. I would
request any participants, if you have any questions, please post them in the question and answer tab. We'll be waiting for another 2 minutes for any queries regarding this topic. Else we will move further.
These accounting standards and auditing standards are subjects which people consider to be dull subjects. And you do not really like them unless you go deep inside it and start loving it and following it in your regular day-to-day practices. And specifically for these kind of sessions, if the session is interactive, if everybody is in a position to raise the query immediately, And if the speaker is also able to see the faces that he is speaking to, it perhaps becomes a little more interesting and a little less boring. Albeit, I must thank the Pune branch authorities, the managing committee, and specifically the chairman, and also Ankita Bangarji for conducting the session so well.
Thank you.
And I hope I could share whatever views I had on standard and auditing, specifically SA 230, and I could live up to the expectations of the management and the delegates.
Yes, yes.
I welcome Gyan Prakash ji. He has just entered on time to start his session.
Yes. I
Thank
guess
you
sir,
very,
we
very
don't
much.
have any questions. So we have not received any questions yet. So we will just move ahead. That was a great session. That was a wonderful, detailed, quite a detailed study you had about the SA 230. So we could learn a lot from that. So thanks a lot for taking out time and coming here and sharing your knowledge. So thank you once again.
Thank you very, very much. Thanks a lot.
I would now welcome our next speaker for the day, CA Gyan Prakash Sharma. Before we start with the session, sir, I'll just give a short introduction of yours to our attendees. So, CA Gyan Prakash Sharma, he's a fellow member of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, and he has been a rank holder in CPT and IPCC. He has received a certificate of appreciation from the District Administration of Sikar, from the government of Rajasthan. He has also received a certificate of achievement awarded by the managing partner of Deloitte, and he has conducted numerous sessions, workshops, conferences, and training programs. He has presented research papers in the national and international conferences. He has published numerous research articles in reputed journals and magazines. He is a faculty for various training programs of the Institute of Chartered Accountants as well as the Institute of Company Secretaries. And he's a corporate trainer associated with professional forums and multinational corporate. We are glad to have you here today. And we can now start with our next session for today on, it is on SA 300 and SA 530. We will take any of the queries regarding the same at the end of the session. Sir, over to you.
Yeah, good evening to all, and thank you very much, ma'am, for your kind words. And it is a very happy moment, and I'm very pleased to be a part of like a Pune branch of this VCM. And definitely these type of VCM are very important in this current era when there are, because of pandemic, we are not able to join physical seminars and all. So these type of VCM always either every topic like standard auditing or Ind AS or taxation or whatever matter. These are very important for all of us. And now, as we see that in first session, the Ravi Patwa sir very well explained SA 230 audit documentation, which is a very most important essay right now, we can say. Because as far as like we are talking about planning and then audit documentation, audit evidence, and end of the like SA 700, which is regarding like reporting requirement and all things. So these are important essays. So today we have already covered SA 230, and now we are moving to SA 300 and 530. So definitely I will start my presentation. So ma'am, please tell me whether are you my presentation is visible or not.
It's not visible yet.
Yeah, just give me a minute.
Yeah,
I'm sharing my screen. I think this is visible, right?
yes, it is visible
Right?
now. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So friends, we start now SA 300, standard on auditing. As all of us know very well that normally we talk about Ind AS and AS, normally accounting standard. We mainly focus on that. But apart from that, standard on auditing are also important, being an auditor. And there are a lot of standards. And out of that, we are covering in this session, there are 2 standards, SA 300, planning and audit of financial statements. As we know, the planning is very important part, and definitely it will take much more time. Normally, I think some people say like planning, we do not waste our time in planning. We just start our audit and start documentation and start sampling and testing and all. But we can say that this is not our good approach, or should not be a strategy. So planning, first of all, start with the planning. In planning, what we need to do, or what major consideration we need to focus, how we can plan, or which circumstances or documentation which we need to do. And then we will go to the audit sampling standards. So now move to audit planning. So first of all, now I think this is not relevant now much more, because we already passed almost 13 years. So this standard on auditing is effective from 1st April 2008. So this is not so much a discussion point here, because we are already in 2021. Main concern is scope, which area will cover by this standard auditing. As we know, the types of audit are like a balance sheet audit, we do like statutory audit, tax audit, and limited review, and like certifications and all things. So this standard deals with auditor's responsibility to plan and audit of financial statements. We are talking about audit of financial statement, not talking about limited review and all other activities, because there are separate standard on auditing for limited review and review process or certifications and all. There are separate guidance note also. So here means audit means like a recurring audit. It might be possible, like we know that in Companies Act we have appointment terms of 5 years or 10 years based on proprietorship or partnership form. So accordingly, it may be our recurring assignment, like last year we also auditor, and current year we also auditor, and it may be initial period audit assignment also, when the auditor change, like any transition period. So we will talk about recurring audit plus initial audit. In both, audit planning is important part, and we need to proper planning and proper documentation. Now, what area we need to cover in planning? The first of very important area is team member involvement. Like first of all, any audit which we are going to do, we need to identify the key team member, or we need to identify the human resource requirement which will properly do or in timely manner can provide deliverables to the client. So in this team member involvement, we will cover, obviously the partner will be covered, and key members of engagement key members may be from a last year audit team members, or maybe an experienced team member for other assignment also. So the first part is audit planning. We need to do a planning meeting, and the planning meeting will cover team members, engagement partner plus engagement team member. Apart from that, there also may be EQCR partner also. And normally it should be, and it must be a part of that particular assignment, because definitely that assignment or that engagement, he should also aware what are the key consideration or what area which we need to focus in that assignment. So audit team member involvement, first of all, very well, we should select like engagement partners responsibility to select the team members who are the part of, because in some cases there might be possible like a large assignment, like if we talk about listed company or a multi-locational assignment. So in that case, audit team size may be 30 or 40 peoples. I think it is not possible to take a meeting for all 30, 40 peoples. So we need to identify the key peoples who are leading the particular assignment, who are leading that branch or that head office location. So that all people, all those persons who are leading at that place, that should be a part of assignment. And second activity will be preliminary engagement activity. Means every assignment which we are going to do, there must be engagement activities. There must be fulfilled. There are the requirement. There are separate essay also regarding engagement activities. So definitely we need to follow that whatever requirements are mentioned in that essay or not. In this area, what we are covering here is performing client continuous procedure. Like earlier we talked about recurring audit. So in case of recurring audit, there are a continuous procedure. Like every year, if I think there is a section in company that also there is a requirement that we need to take a permission. Like client need to take permission from a auditor that whether they are eligible to be appointed as a statutory auditor or not. So definitely it is our duty to give consent and to give the details of any cases or any like disqualification from our side. If there is for that assignment, then definitely we need to communicate. So client continuous procedure, it must be followed in every year. Or if we say that if when there is change in auditor, if there is no changes and circumstances, then definitely we can say that it can be continued. But if there is any change, any circumstance like auditor disqualifications or like auditor changes or transition or remove anything else. And apart from that, compliance with ethical requirement also we need to follow, as we discussed the EQCR, because it is a very important part. And this is a very much important for auditor point of view also, because like being an engagement partner, we have responsibility to sign a balance sheet or sign a tax audit. So it is a pure responsibility of us, but there is a concept of EQCR partner. So because of EQCR concept or like ethical requirement concept, we can safeguard ourselves. Yes, we have complied all ethical requirement, all EQCR requirement, all engagement procedures. Understanding the terms of engagement, here we know there is, I think, the specific format also given, like ICI for engagement letter. For any assignment, we need to take or we need to take a countersign engagement letter by client also, because in engagement letter we can mention our like terms and conditions of our what are our deliverables or what are our responsibility and what our limitations, and all these things are mentioned. So these are part of planning activities. Like planning meeting are the part, and in planning meeting we need to ensure whether any engagement processes has been completed or not. After that, if once engagement procedures are completed, like any risk qualifications or like client acceptance procedures has been completed based on our firm's policy, based on our ICI guidelines and all things, then we can move on to audit planning, which is actual phase of planning. In planning phase, we can say audit overall strategy and now audit planning. So audit strategy, what do you mean by audit strategy? Obviously, whenever we are going to start any task, then definitely before starting, we can prepare a strategy. And in a strategy now, obviously we can finalize or we can decide the timelines, like deliverables for the team members, and what are the risky areas. So these type of overall broad view, this is the strategy. And then execution of that strategy in planning way, that will be audit planning part, development of a planning. So now the main focus area, these are the basic structure. Now we will move to the what audit strategy and audit planning. These are the key part of this standard on auditing. In this SA 300, what we will do, our primary responsibility being an audit team part, our duties prepare an audit strategy to reduce our timelines, or like we can say to reduce our cost also, or to give effective deliverables on timely manner to the client, because overall responsibility is client satisfaction. And so in this strategy, we need to focus on some of areas. And the first area is identification of characteristics of that engagement. So what is the meaning of that engagement characteristics? Definitely the meaning is assignment complexity, because as we know, there may be in some cases like a banking industry audit. So there are the different very requirement and very different approach we need to follow. And in case of a chemical industry or sugar industry, we need to change our mindset, or we need to focus some another area. And if we are going to do an assignment of a small company like a trading concern, then there are different situations. So planning purely depends on the complexity, which type of assignment we are going to do and how bigger size it is. In case of a very small, like a company audit, if we are going to do, then definitely we can prepare a single pager memo or like a planning memorandum, and we can do and identify and mention all of our activities. But in case of a bigger company, like listed companies and multi-locational companies and like foreign companies also, so in that case, we need to focus specific area. So we need to check the complexity, the regulatory requirement, and the size of that assignment. And apart from that, objective of that assignment also, like a statutory audit. If we are going to audit for like a group reporting, then we need to prepare a planning accordingly. And if we are going to report on a standalone financials only, then our planning will be changed. And so definitely like a branch audit, if we are going to be a branch audit, then our planning pattern will be changed. So main purpose, we need to focus which type of audit we are going to do and what the exact output we are going to deliver. Like we are going to deliver audit report, so definitely we need to focus our opinion part, the opinion which we are going to do, like going to issue an opinion. So accordingly, we need to focus or prepare our planning and timeline. This is obviously we know that we need to focus on timeline and we need to complete our audit within a time frame. Communication with the management and those charged with governance, this is somehow important, especially when there are changes in the circumstances, like changes in business model, any government policies, any company's competitive environment. So any type of changes which are very much important, we need to understand before starting an audit. So how we can understand, how we can like know the assignment, that risk. Definitely we can identify or we can know the risk with the discussion with the management, because we know that management is very much concerned or very much familiar with the situations or the like actual circumstances which directly impact that business. Last year we know that COVID significantly impacted many industries. So before going to start an audit, though we already have an experience of 1 year, but still this year also, we need to discuss with management that because of COVID, how much impact our business is impacted from this situation, because our revenue may be declined or our customers may be like we may lose our customers also. There is a significant change in government policy, moratorium period also. So there are many changes, and definitely we need to understand with management because they are very much familiar. This is the important part. We need to involve and we need to have a planning meeting with the management. Now identifying significant factor. If we have a meeting and we know the primary overview of the entity, so what are the external factor and what are the internal factor which can impact particular business or particular industry or our audit assignment. And then after that, we need to identify significant factor. Significant factor, obviously there is a separate essay, as we know that we are covering the overall planning part. So this is the overall planning part. This essay 300 cover planning, but there are separate essay also for a specific area of planning. Essay 315, identification and assessing of the risk of material misstatement, ROM identification. In this area, definitely we'll cover the risk of that industry and that business, and we identify what based on our past experience and based on our like last assignment also we can identify. So we need not to discuss much more about this ROM area here. And preliminary engagement activity, whether the knowledge gained or other engagement is relevant, yes, definitely, as we talked in earlier slide, that there is a engagement team member or like engagement partner, because definitely we know that engagement partner generally not changed in every year. So he has an experience from past assignment also. In planning part, he can give his input that what are the risky areas in the last year or what are the key considerations which we need to focus. So these are the part of like the audit strategy, how we can prepare our strategy. So we need to consider these areas. And last, necessary resources for engagement, as we earlier discussed, like we need to take research, we need to plant a human resource for our physical verifications and branch audit and multi-locations. And if we are doing an audit of like a big organizations, so definitely for head office and for units and different. So these are areas which we need to consider audit strategy. Definitely, if we have considered all these areas and prepared the strategy very well, what we need to do, what we are going to do in next like 1 month or 2 months during our audit period, then we can plan our audit planning memorandum, or we can say our audit planning like documentation properly. So after covering the strategy part, we'll focus to the planning area. Obviously, the planning area which we will cover here. And the first of all, we'll cover the room identification. Obviously, any particular assignment after completing the engagement activity, engagement procedures, and like a client acceptance procedures we have completed, then definitely with the discussion, with the meeting with the client, and after understanding the external internal factors which are going to be affected that business or that organization, and based on all these experience, we will prepare our planning part. And in planning part, we will cover the room identification, obviously risk identification, because in audit, this is our primary concern. First of all, we need to identify what are the risks in that audit, and then only we can move what we need to do, or what our strategy or what our like response to that risk should be happened. So identification of room, then accordingly planning of auditor's response to assess risk. I think any companies, there in every audit assignment, definitely we prepare a memorandum or we identify the risk, and especially when there is IFC is also applicable on that assignment, then this is much more concern. We need to identify the risk according to control point of view also. So we can say room or like risk control metrics. So we need to focus that also in this case. So identification of risk, this is a part of audit planning. Then assess like auditor's response about those risks. So definitely, if we identify the risk like control risk, like substantive testing risk, or any like a verification related or a planning related risk, then accordingly we need to prepare our response, or our past experience can help us the responses also. Develop a plan for other audit procedures that are required to be carried out, so that definitely this is purely based on our practical experience or past experience. If we have any specific idea, or sometime it happens that normally we do an audit of a particular one client, and now when we move to the next client, then something which we be familiar, or which we discuss with the client in earlier assignment, so the same thing which we also implement to the next assignment also. Because we can say, sir, this is happened in the like we have done one client, and these type of issues or these type of discussions which we have already made, though we are not disclosing the name of our client, but that understanding we can also use here in part of our planning. Definitely, sure. The practical experience is very much important. And other consideration we also need to focus. So what are the other consideration? In this case, smaller entity in big organization, or like a big company's audit, definitely like big firms, or we can say big 4 or big 10, or like big organizations of audit firm, do a very well prepared audit strategy. They have an like a ICQ, internal control questionnaires also. They have an audit checklist also, EAS and S checklist also, and they have a risk identification like library also. So lot of things are available for audit planning or need to do in big organization. But in case of a smaller entity, these are not possible, as we know that we have only 5 to 10 days. Normally, smaller like a trading concern or a very small company, we need to have only limited timelines to complete our audit. So in that case, in our audit planning, what we need to do, whether we are required to do a detailed testing, definitely we need to cover all areas, but in summarized way. So specific consideration for smaller entities means based on a review of working papers and highlighting issue identified in audit just completed, means the previous year audit or any audit which are in similar nature, or we have just completed that audit for this year also. Updated in current period based on discussion with the owner, as we earlier already discussed that we need to discuss with management because they have ultimate responsibility and they have proper knowledge of that business. So definitely after discussion with management or based on our experience, we need to prepare a summary memorandum, or we can say it like a summarized way, a planning memorandum, which covers all matters of audit strategy and audit planning. This is specifically related to smaller entities, specifically mentioned in our standard on auditing that in case of a smaller entity, still we need to do a planning part. We can't skip this part, though we can do in a summarized way. That's fine, but definitely we need to do. Changes may be happen in audit strategy and planning during the course of audit, as we know, because like the best example is last year, when some of audit has been started in April. And I think in case of IFC audit, audit has been started in February also. But in March, there is a lockdown. So in that case, all auditor and auditees, they both can't do anything. In that situation, we need to change our audit planning. We need to move on from physical document to soft copy documentation. So in that situation, this is a good example. So in that situation, definitely our audit plan will be changed. Our documentation style will be changed. And our the approach which we need to follow, how we can obtain the documents from online mode, or how we can, how much we can rely on that documentation. So all these are part of audit planning, and our planning will be changed accordingly. Apart from if there is any changes in like regulations, like any budget or any government policies, it's changed during the year, any policy, FEMA policy and all things. So in that situation also, we need to change our planning if required only. Now the concern is we discuss the planning. So what are the main coverage in planning? The planning, obviously we understand the human resource management, and we need to identification of risk, and then other part is risk response. So what are the response should be against those risks? And then like our past experience based on prepare a summary memorandum or like a summarized way. There are the checklist. And if we talk, because as sir already told, that audit documentation, which is very much important. Normally there is a people say in audit, if you are not documented anything, then it means you didn't do any audit. So normally it happens, because as we know, if we are going for a peer review, or if we are even not going for peer review, then also we need to maintain our audit working paper for 8 years. So definitely working part is very much important, and we need to prepare properly the documentation for audit planning. What documents we need to prepare? This is also important, because if we have a broader list, that these are the documents which normally we need to prepare, then definitely if we have checklists like tax audit, I can say example like Form 3CD, because we know the Form 3CD in two parts. One sided is the question part and another side is the response part. So we know the questions, that's why we do audit properly, because we need to identify the answer or the response against those questions. In the same way, if we have what documentation normally we need to do, then definitely we can prepare our audit strategy or planning very well. So planning, first of all, audit strategy, this is a normally discussion part, and now audit planning, which is actually documentation part, or which is the base part, how we need to proceed or how we will proceed for our audit or conclude our audit. Any significant changes during the audit, then definitely these need to be covered in planning. Now we talk about overall audit strategy. In audit strategy, documentation is mandatory. The key decisions considered necessary to properly plan the audit, like scope, which area we are going to cover, our deliverables, what will be, and now our timing, because it depends on timing also. If our timelines, we have a very short span of time, then definitely we need to increase our audit team size also, and we need to like do involvement of some key important members, some experienced member in also. So conduct of audit and timing and scope, all these are part of the strategy. These all things must be documented in our working paper. How we identify the what are the requirement, and how, which timelines, and what activities which we are going to do. Audit planning part, obviously significant matters should be discussed with the engagement team, or we can say like engagement partner, HR partner, and the key team members, so they can discuss, and with the management also, we can discuss each part of a like a discussion point. Significant changes may summarize overall audit strategy in form of a memorandum, or we can say in another name, it's audit planning memorandum. This is a good name. So this is a short working paper which normally summarize or describes all the audit planning requirement or planning activities can be covered here. Documentation of audit plan is record of plan nature, timing, extent of risk assessment, further risk assessment at assertion level, and response of those risks. We know there are three types of assertions: balance sheet assertion and P&L assertion, and like disclosure part also. So based on that assertions and specific assays governed for those are type of activities. So based or accordingly those assay, considering those assay, we need to focus or prepare risk assessment plan also. These are the overall planning part. Normally these should be covered in documentation which we need to cover. Now in planning, standard audit program. Yes, normally a big organization or big audit firm have their library procedures. They have audit program which is already prepared, well defined by their internal like research team or like a professional development team. Like for a banking assignment, there will be a separate plan or separate guidelines. For a chemical industry assignment, separate guideline. For we can say like education industry, there will be a separate, because the risk definitely will be different, and timelines may be different, or even for deliverables may also be different. As we know, the banking industry, the balance sheet format and disclosures are somehow different, and in case of a normal industry, apart from normal industries. So there is a standard audit program normally big organization have. Even in case of a small organization or like a small firm, we can also prepare our audit program based on our past experience. Or audit completion checklist, there must be some checklist. Yes, these are the conditions which we need to check, like engagement procedure, whether followed or yes or no, whether consent letter is provided or not, whether engagement letter is signed or not. Or we can go to the next part, whether like control testing has been performed or not, or like a confirmation has been taken or not. So these are the checklist. So these are part which we need to prepare in a proper checklist way, and tailored questions to reflect the particular engagement circumstances. As we discussed earlier, ICQ, internal control questionnaires, these are specifically governed or cover our like control testing part. So there may be a control like a very, we can say like a approval part also, because there may be a management approval and different things. So we need to prepare a checklist like FAQ type. These are not specifically FAQ, but like FAQ can help us to understand a particular situation. So these are the same examples. Record of significant changes to overall audit strategy and audit planning should document. If there is any changes from the previous year or even current year during the audit time period, then definitely it must be documented, because based on any changes, our strategy will be changed, and our like reporting timeline may be changed. Our discussion or our reporting requirement may also be changed. Like if we have any disqualification or like like qualification and all things, any changes in audit, so definitely we need to document it properly. And resulting changes to the plan nature, timing, extent, we have already discussed. Reason for significant changes, definitely we need to document it, because without documentation, all are like wastage of time. Because documentation is very much mandatory in every audit assignment. It must be done. In smaller entities, a suitable and brief memorandum may serve our purpose for documentation audit planning. So these type of work papers we need to prepare. So if we summarize this essay, then we can say like this essay is mainly covering the part of audit part and audit recurring and like initial audit. In case of any type of audit, it can be done. And main concern is like audit strategy and audit planning. Strategy is more or less concerned for decision making process, which covers like we can say like engagement team members involvement, or like risk assessment and like management discussion part, or identification and complexity of the business environment and all things. And planning, which is actually the documentation part or the activities which we are going to do in that assignment. That is important. So planning mainly covers like risk identification and room and any like a checklist and all things. So these are the part. So we have already discussed like what documentation we need to do. I think if there is any questions or discussion points in this essay, then definitely we can cover at the last end of the session. So that first of all we cover the next document, next essay also. So now we are moving to the next standard on auditing, essay 530, audit sampling. Sampling is very much important. Why? As audit planning is important, like documentation is important, and the same way sampling is important, because there are the like large data or large populations, and where we need to give an opinion in 2 or 3 pages that all the balance sheet and all documentation and disclosures are perfect, or we can say like our fair presentation are showing the fair, like a fair view in balance sheet. So how we can like make any opinion? The opinion can be made based on our testing part, obviously, audit evidence part, but for which type of evidence we need to gather. These are depends on audit sampling. Means which type of samples or how many samples, how the process of identification or like documentation of sampling. These are covered in this essay. And now this essay obviously the starting from 1st April 2009. So this is not much relevant because 2021 already it is implemented, and scope deals with auditors' use of statistical and non-statistical sampling method while designing and selecting audit sample, performing test of control, test of details, which is also called substantive testing, and evaluate the result of sample. So we are going to issue a report and opinion on the large population that these are true and fair view presentation. How we can give a report, because we are not able to check each and every transaction. So here this essay come into picture, that we need to select the samples which is properly represented the whole populations, and based on that sampling, based on testing of that sample, we can report, we can issue, or we can conclude that the financial statements are not materially misstated. So this essay covers sampling strategy and sampling method mainly. Essay, this is a complement of audit evidence. Obviously, we need to take audit evidence, but for which type of sample, or like for which documentation, which area we need to take evidence. These are covered, these samples are covered, this essay. Why sampling required? As we discussed, that sampling is required to provide a reasonable basis for the auditor to draw conclusion about population from which the sample is selected. Like if we say, like we talk about FAR, fixed asset register, there are the thousands of additions in FAR. Ideally, we are going to issue an opinion that yes, FAR is not materially misstated because this is a part of financial statement. So if we are giving an opinion on financial statement, it means we are giving our opinion on each and every part of that balance sheet or financials. So in that financial, the FA is example, for one example, like we talk about. So in one, there are 1,000 additions in that FA, but as an auditor, it is not possible to us to check each and every transaction. So it is our duty how we can make a conclusion. So we will identify first of all samples which we need to test. So the sample is a key basis based on which, like if we selected sample 10 samples or 15 samples. Right now we are not talking about the like number of samples, we will cover in next slides. For example, just take a 15 samples we selected. So based on 15 samples selected, we made our testing, we gathered audit evidence, and we documented properly, and then we conclude that these are the like there is no misstatement in these 15 samples. Then we can draw a conclusion for the whole FAR that every additions in FAR is reasonable and like fair, because the samples we have selected and we have tested, these are like represented the whole population. So based on just 10 or 15 samples, we can conclude 1,000 items. These are the importance of this assay. Like sampling is important. Why? To conclude on a large population based on testing of some of the transactions. The audit sampling is important. Things which need to be considered in sampling. This is important because normally what happened, generally in case of like if there is not properly leadership or not proper planning or like control by a senior team members of audit team members at the junior, then there may be a situation where like if you talk about audit, we know that there are articles and there are the junior team members and members also. So it might be possible that some members who are not familiar of much more than assignment, then might be possibility that they took a samples which doesn't represent the whole population. So if our sample is not correct or sample is not representing our population, then definitely the audit evidence and audit conclusions all are not so much relevant for us. So sampling, especially what we need to do in sampling, which type of sample or how we need to select our sample. This is the important things, because once we sample selected, then definitely our focus will shift to the audit testing part, audit evidence part only. And we will gather the audit evidence and we will draw a conclusion. But the sampling is important. So main focus will be like purpose of audit sampling. We know there is a control testing and substantial testing. So control testing, like we can say, the part of normally the IFC testing, but it doesn't mean that only IFC is there, then only you need to do control testing. Control definitely we need to do. So we need to check first of all, before going to start any sampling, what is our purpose? Control testing, then definitely we need to follow the procedures issued by ICI, or we need to check the control established or frequency of control. So our strategy will be changed, our sampling method will be changed, or pattern will be changed. And if we are going to do the substantive testing, TOD, test of details testing, like a FA example we take. So in that case, sampling will be different. Characteristics of the population, yes. In example, there may be a ledger if you selected like repair and maintenance ledger. Though the transactions value is 1 CR, total transaction value or total for particular year a total is 1 CR, and there are 1,000 number of items here. And apart from that, there is a ledger rent ledger also. And if an entity have a big posh area their office, so let's suppose the 50 lakh rupees per month rent. So in that situation, the total rental charges will be 6 crore rupees for a year. But the repair and maintenance ledger have only 1 CR population total. But if we talk about rent, this is a very simple ledger because we know there are the 12 transactions and these are based on agreement. So there is no risk. Definitely we can select one sample and we can conclude that this is this ledger is correct and the populations is correct. But in case of repair and maintenance, there might be a possibility some revenue nature item can be capitalized, or some capital nature item can be charged to the revenue, or it might be possible in case of Indias and all things, some inventory items need not to be considered in repair and maintenance and all things. So characteristics of that population, this is the population ledger, this is the starting population. So nature of that population is much important. If there is complicated, if there is a hazard manner or covered the whole area, whole year, in that situation, our sampling pattern and our number of samples will be changed. Size of sampling, obviously, number of sample size we need to focus. This is specifically our guide to all of us, how we need to select samples and how many samples we need to select. There is a separate guidelines also issued by ICI in case of internal financial control, number of samples they have specifically mentioned. So in that case, we need to follow that number of samples only. Method of sampling equal chances of sample selection, professional judgment. Yes, this is also important. So the key thing is how many samples we need to select. And now another thing is how the method, how we need to select sample, because there are the different methods. Some of a statistical method and some are judgmental method. Because normally what happens when we have a short timeline, then what we do normally, a person can do like a simple sample. He selected simple sample is last 1 month leisure he obtained, and last 2-3 vouchers he tested, and yes sir, in this case we have selected the 5 samples and we can conclude on the whole population. No, this is not right way. This method is not right for sample selection, because you only focus on particular block and you selected 2, 3, 5 samples and say that this is our testing part. You need to select method in such a way that covers there is a possibility to selection of a particular transactions of the whole populations in equal chances. So the method is very much important. Number of size is much more important. And then tolerable misstatement. This is the separate part we'll cover in the next slide. So we cover the size of sampling. Sampling normally depends on populations. Obviously, we have discussed size of population and the complexity and characteristics of population. Like we know any high value populations, if we have in a balance sheet item, then we need to focus much more and we need to take more samples. For example, if you can say like there are some ledgers like expense part. So if we know that there are the many expenses which have a very small amount, but in terms of number of transactions are very large, or like different transactions. But we know that if cumulatively we combine the total value of these are expenses, then it is very much less amount compared to the total balance sheet value or total financial statement value. Then definitely we can ignore, or we can give a less importance in sampling or size of sampling that population, or we can focus to population which are more important in terms of value, in terms of complexity, or the important to make any conclusion on financial statement. So nature of population is much more important for to identify the number of sample size. And now sampling risk in case of ROM identification. When earlier slide we discussed the identification ROM. If there is a risk of material misstatement are high, there is a lot of risk, then definitely our sample size will increase, because the sampling size depends on the normal risk and significant risk. So if there is a normal risk in particular population, then definitely number of sample size we can reduce. Like we talk about rent ledger earlier example, because number of transactions and though value are high, but the risks are very low. We know that there is a repetitive nature transactions. So the risk identification and sampling is purely depend on risk identification. Number of samples, normally it is a professional judgment of auditors, but in case of he need to check our past experience also. Yes, I think somebody has raised the question. So ma'am, should we take the question right now, or we can take a later?
We have not received any questions in the question answer tab.
Yeah, I think somebody has raised question, Vikrant Keshav Rao, I think. So there is a query from their side. If you have option, then you can
yeah, I'm not able to. I guess someone has raised a hand, but we cannot give an option for them to speak. It's not allowed in this type of session.
Okay.
They can just type a question. So whoever has raised your hand, please.
Yes, please write your question in chat box. So at the end of the session, we can discuss that question and answer session.
Yeah.
So now this is the mainly a number of sample selection. This is purely depend on professional judgment, but professional judgment should be in such way that it covers whole population, or it should be on our past experience, or standard methods, or that assignment audit planning strategy. Based on all that activity, the sampling should be done. So sample size we have discussed, how many number of samples we need to check. So there are normally we segregate in two parts: control testing and substantive testing. Control testing, there is specifically mentioned a guidance note on IFC, which is specifically governed that part. and there are sample size also mentioned. Substantive testing we can decide at our own judgment, which depends on purely the value and the complexity or importance of that population in financial statement. Size of sampling, population, the entire set of data. We know this is the whole data from where we need to select the sample and sampling risk. Yes, identification of ROM. If risks are high, then number of samples will be high, number of testing will be high. And if there is a normal risk, not a significant risk, then our sampling will be less. Like in financial statement, if we talk about normally the revenue recognition is considered as significant risk, or we can say like a management override of controls, there is a risk also. So in that situation, there are the significant risks. So definitely our number of sample size will increase. So size of sampling depends on the importance of population or weightage of population. Now, this I think most of us are familiar with this number of sampling, like numbers of samples, which is clearly mentioned in IFC guidance note on IFC internal control testing issued by the ICI. So we are not talking much more about here because this is a very well-defined procedures and we all know about that. Sample selection method. These are also important. There are the 4 or 5 methods, and some are very like scientifically or very standard method, and some methods which are purely on judgmental basis. We need to focus on like some standard methods, random selections, systematic selections, or we can say monetary unit sampling, hazard selections, and block selections. We talk about the first 3, which are the normally we should follow. Random selections, method of sampling which ensure that all items within the population stand an equal chance of selection by use of random number table. So here there is no professional biasness in this sample selection method, because we know that there is a random number table and we have like a normally organization prepare their own table, or like we can say they put the data and population and they mention that we need to 5 samples, then the random number selection will be generated by the system automatically, or we can say the standard methods, time to time, or like after the certain number of transactions, sample selection will be done. So there is no biasness by the auditor, or we can say like a audit team member, because might be possible that because of the time crunch, the audit team members may select the samples in such a way that the samples are not relevant or not so much concluding samples, which based on which we can conclude our financial statement, but due to time constraint, it might be possible that a person can select a sample. So this method will avoid this type of situation, because in this method, the samples are not biased. These are selected by a random number table. So we can't manipulate, or like a person can't change like at their own choice, because these are the statistical method. The second method is systematic selection. Number of sampling unit in population is divided by sample size to give a sampling interval. This is normally team members follow and very well explained, very well settled method. In this case, like you talk about like 1,000 number of items in particular population, and we need to check like 5 samples. So what we will do? Our strategy will be like total number of transactions was 1,000 divided by number of samples which we required 5. So 1,000 divided by 5 means 200. So we know that there is a number gap 200. Now we can select the samples in such a way, like first sample if we select 5 number, so next sample will be 205, another sample will be 405. So in such a way we can select the samples. So there will be a random number generator and number table, and accordingly in certain area we can select a sample. But we need to focus one thing in this method that is important. Population should not be structured in such a way that sampling interval corresponds with the particular pattern in the population. Means like in this example we talk about the every 200 the sample will be selected, but if we see the ledger like population in such way that every 200 after 200 transactions, normally the same type of samples will be covered up. So this is the no relevance that we are doing a similar type of repetitive samples of that particular population. We need to cover, or we need to select a different kind of transactions, different type of samples from overall the whole population period. So this must be specifically focused in this method, that the transactions should be not in such way that there are the repetitive transactions happen in the same number of times, or same positions. So that every time the chances will be the similar samples to be taken up. The another method is monetary unit sampling. Normally, some organizations use this method, and even I also have experience to use this method. So in this method, normally the value weighted selections, like transactions, we have some small value and some high value. So in any samples like debtors list, or we can say creditors list, there may be some small value debtors and some high value debtors. So this method mainly focus on weightage value method, like high value transactions will be captured up, and we need to focus more and more high value transactions rather than small transactions. And this is a very good methods. Definitely we need to follow. Obviously our focus should be on in such way that high value transactions which are in big numbers, which can impact our financial statement, that should be taken in our sampling, and that should be covered up in proper way. Now hazard sample selections. So this is not a structured technique, and normally we should not follow. Only in case of, we can say, like in general entry testing, normally we can do this testing, because there are no specific pattern, or there is a different type of transactions happens in general entry. So in this method, we based on our manual decision, professional judgment, we select high value item, duplicate value item, like rounding of item, and the transactions which have the similar value and repetitive value, or like same narrations. These type of transactions can be selected from this method. Block selection, this is ideally not preferable, because in this method there is a particular transactions or particular block, like we discussed earlier example. If audit team members select a sample from particular time period, like last 5 days of a general ledger, rather than whole year population, so these are the not a good method, because in this case we are focused only on some particular time period, or some block, or some particular transactions list, not focus on whole transactions, whole populations. So these are not preferable. So there are the different methods. Obviously these methods, which method we need to follow, this is purely a professional judgment call, and this is a part of our audit planning, that we decide which type of audit sampling method we will do in our audit. So this is another part, and now we'll move to the tolerable misstatement, or we can say these are the normally the deviation part. So we can consider here that in two parts. One is the control testing, and another is the substantive testing. Why we are doing the sampling? We are doing the sampling to draw a conclusion on like a balance sheet, a true and fair picture. So control testing, we also need to focus whether there is a deviation in controls or not. And in substantive testing, we mainly focus on value transactions. The value are like true and fair or not. So tolerable misstatement means the amount by which a financial statement line item can differ from its true amount. For example, the debtors list is given like 10 lakh rupees, but out of 10 lakh rupees, there might be a possible that 50,000 rupees debtors are bad and doubtful debts, or we can say that we don't have any documentation or any proof of that debtors. So this is a misstatement. If we do our testing and we find during our confirmation procedures or testing procedures that the 50,000 debtors are doubtful, or there might be a possibility that these debtors are there is no supporting available. So there should be a ratio or a tolerable misstatement, because for example, the balance sheet size is like 10 crore and debtors like having an only doubtful figure is 50,000 rupees. So if this is our like tolerable limit, this is a limit which we can ignore. That within this limit, if there is any deviation, then definitely we can ignore, because it might be possible there are some minor gap or minor deviation maybe happen in an audit. So this is a tolerable limit for purpose of value part or substantive testing part. These are the terms. This is the part of audit planning. Also, we need to identify like performance materiality. We can very well discuss this amount, how we need to identify or calculate. There is a separate essay. And now tolerable deviation rate, which mainly focused related to the control part. Yes, if there is a control which is not implemented in such a way which that control has been designed, or like there is no there is lack of approval part, then definitely there is a deviation in control. And being an auditor, we need to report that control in our audit opinion in our audit report. And if we are going to issue a separate report, then definitely we can easily we can properly give our opinion in separate opinion part. So there is a deviation rate is high. Definitely, whenever there is a deviation rate is high or there is a misstatement, more and more misstatement, then our sampling size will increase. So these tolerable misstatement and rate of deviation are the basis of number of increase and decrease of our sample size. If we need to increase our sample size, then definitely if there is any deviation, misstatement much more, then our number of samples will be increased. So overall, we covered now this like sampling, how we can select the samples, what are the methods, and how many number of samples we need to select. So all these are covered in this like essay. And if there is any questions, then definitely the person can ask. So ma'am, now we can move to question answer session if any question have.
Yes, I guess we will wait for another 1 or 2 minutes for any questions. We have not received any questions in the chat box as well as the question and answer tab yet.
So anybody, if raising hand, then if possibility, then can we give a right so that they can directly have contact, if possible from your
I
side.
would like to ask the branch members, is that possible?
Just check.
I guess there's no one available from the branch right now.
I think only a branch or like a IT technical members can
Yeah,
see the
only they
question.
will be able to help us with this query.
Yeah.
But I guess we don't have them here.
So no issue. So already I think there are the 3 essay which we have covered very well. And if any questions, any query, then definitely the person or participant can ask that query to the ICI Pune branch, or directly can send message or WhatsApp on my mobile number also if they have any query. Definitely.
Ahead, assume we don't have any questions or queries. That was a great session. That was wonderful knowledge. You know, the audit season has already started. So the topics taken in this session were really important with respect to this auditing season. So thanks a lot. And because of this virtual platform, we could have speakers from, various parts of the country. So I would really thank both the speakers. Thank you for coming here and giving your time for this wonderful sessions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And thanks to all participants that they have given so much time to listen and the patience they have. Thanks to all. Have a good evening.
Thank you, participants. We will be meeting tomorrow at 6 p.m. again. Have a good day.